In an ever-evolving digital landscape, for your business to thrive, you must adapt or die. Welcome to Marketing in the Age of AI, the podcast helping you harness the power of AI and marketing tools to revitalize and grow your business. And now here's your host, marketing expert and author of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI, Emanuel Rose.
Welcome to this episode of Marketing in the Age of AI. Today we are talking one of my favorite topics right now, which is what it looks like to update and create content so that the generative engines can find you, or answer engines can find you. And what I like to call GEO, it's a outgrowth of SEO, and some people call it AEO, but as it continues to mature, we will probably end up with one cohesive term, and our guest will probably have some opinions about that today. I'm going to be joined by Daniel Horowitz, who's a seasoned SEO strategist with a remarkable track record at Informatica, where he leads cross-functional SEO strategies that integrate topical authority, internal linking, and AI search visibility. Daniel's innovative pilot program recently garnered over 500,000 impressions in Google AI overviews, showcasing his ability to align SEO with organizational goals. His expertise extends to past roles in which he scaled revenue-generating systems and executed successful SEO strategies for clients such as Shopify and E Trade. Beyond the technical realm, Daniel is also a published writer and comic creator, bringing a unique storytelling perspective to his work. Let's dive right in. Daniel.
Thanks for having me, Emanuel. Excited to be here.
I'm really happy. Absolutely. Well, you know, we take what you write, we go to your LinkedIn, we go to ChatGPT, and we make a big stew out of it. So.
Hey, man, sounded great to me. So.
Well, I love it. You and I, we share some things in that we're both writers. I have a series of children's books, and so not quite comics, but in a similar vein of simple but yet still powerful storytelling, right?
Very cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for taking some time to have a conversation. Let's start first with, is it GEO, AEO, or is it just like SEO on steroids?
Honestly, I just call it AI search or AI SEO, but I've heard all the different acronyms thrown around, but I would say, you know, it's still SEO fundamentally, but there are some changes, right? And, you know, we'll get into that. So it's kind of like if SEO used to kind of be the redheaded stepchild of marketing, now it's suddenly thrown into the limelight. And I think it's a great opportunity for anyone who works in search right now.
Yeah, well, I guess let's talk about a little bit about what the fundamentals of SEO are that really port over into this AI search concept.
Absolutely. So the biggest thing is authority, specifically topical authority, building up your expertise, building trust with your audience, kind of making sure that you have a cohesive narrative message across your website. All these things are really important because the biggest change between, I would say, optimizing for generative search engines like ChatGPT, Google's AI mode, et cetera, versus Google as narrative drivers, right? So it's not just about if you're showing up, right? Like, in the past you used to say, you'd have a keyword, you'd have, you would be able to go to SEMrush, Ahrefs, look up the volume, write maybe a couple articles, try to optimize toward that keyword. And there you go. Now you might show up, but you don't totally control the ways in which you show up. So you have to create these narrative drivers on not just your website, but your overall digital presence. So this is everything from YouTube to podcast appearances, TikTok even. So there's so much more to do than there used to be.
Yeah, we really have seen what I call the channel explosion, right? I mean, it's so fractured from that perspective. In the old days, we just buy some some ads in the newspaper and maybe some radio ads, and it was really straightforward.
Yeah.
But now we really stratify it down, which is positive in that we can get very granular with how we reach audiences, but it also means you've got to continue to build on your ICPs and your ideal client profiles and really figure out what they're trying to find out through that whole process of education, and then providing it not just for them, but then also for the engines, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you might be surprised the ways that your potential customers might be looking to find you or don't map neatly to, say, the keywords of the past. So, a big thing that people are doing now is, working with their sales teams. Generally there's been kind of like the silo between sales and marketing, right? You can go through the sales call logs, see what customers are actually saying to salespeople. And then you can kind of use that, go into these generative engines, poke around, see what's actually coming up. And that can help you optimize content as well. So that there's so many more avenues for discoverability than there used to be just, a year ago.
Yeah. Now some people are talking about going back to old blog posts and rehabbing those blog posts. What do you think about that?
I think there's an element of that matters. So we're doing that to add certain things like, FAQs are pretty important. I'm not saying that those are the end all to be all to drive traffic by any means, but sometimes it helps to take key concepts from the article or maybe something that wasn't covered totally fully and, add those to give additional context to, LLMs. Of course, everything LLMs can only read HTML. This is like really important. I think not everyone understands this. So if you're putting JavaScript on your site, if you're using kind of like images or things like that, PDFs, like those cannot be read. So everything has to be in HTML. So, even just going into old articles, I'm not a huge believer in, I've heard the term like chunking thrown around a lot. I'm not a huge believer in that. So what that means is like breaking everything up into like digestible, like 80 to 100 words. That kind of can actually reduce some of the context. But what you can do is just, use a better hierarchy and heading structure. So use H3s, use H4s. Like sometimes people would just have H2 sections that were just walls of text. You can break those up with headings, but that doesn't mean that you should specifically do it just for LLMs. It's just good practice in general to read things.
Right. And, and I think in some ways it makes it easier to read for the humans too, especially if you build out a summary at the beginning and then the FAQs at the bottom, and it makes it a little more dynamic for the humans to read too.
Definitely. And even, adding things like call out boxes into them, make sure they're in HTML, of course, but like call out boxes in the middle of things just to like, hit a key point, trying to do things like defining what you're really saying in the beginning of an article. So, for example, like if you were running, let's say a cooking blog, you'd be like, oh, my Nona's recipe, back in the day, blah, blah, blah. But, you could weave some of that storytelling into your article, but end of the day, people just want a lasagna recipe, right? So like, you want to make sure that you hit that up front.
Yeah, that's interesting. What about on the LLM.txt file? Where do you fall on that one?
Those are not impactful. I wouldn't use them. I think there's this whole cottage industry of like, this is why I don't love the term like GEO, because not to say there are legitimate differences between SEO and AI search, but I think there's this whole cottage industry that's come up of like these GEO strategists who've never done SEO in their life. And suddenly in the last year, they're the biggest experts on how to optimize for LLMs and things like that. And that's just one service that's been sold.
Yeah, that's interesting. What is it? What do you love as your favorite tactic or technique right now in this period of discovery for AI search?
You're gonna laugh, but honestly, working cross-functionally is like the best thing, because I think SEO, has kind of always been like the janitor in the closet kind of role. I've been in the industry for 10 years. Prior to working at Informatica, I worked at an agency. I ran my own, the link building department. So like almost kind of like a mini agency outside of their agency. And that was fun, but you were just so siloed from everything else. Right. So now like I work with, product marketers, I work with the web team, I work with the growth marketing team. So, I work with the campaigns team and just like make sure those, narrative drivers are really aligned on the website. I think that's awesome. I think it's awesome that the, anyone who's in search marketing, this is a huge opportunity to really, kind of jump on this AI search bandwagon, so to speak. Not to say that it's illegitimate to do that, but just that there's so much more attention being put on the field of search in general, because search is ultimately like wherever you find information, right? So that could be YouTube, like TikTok, and anywhere. It's not just on your website anymore.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, break down a little bit if people aren't familiar with this idea of narrative drivers. Just explain a little bit about 3 or 4 steps in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll actually give you a great example at Informatica. So Informatica has been around for like 30 years. So in the tech industry, it's a dinosaur, right? So traditionally was known as an on-premises solution, and in the last 5 years has moved to their cloud-based solution, IDMC. So, we've done a lot of research into using SEMrush's AI SEO toolkit to see, not just how often we're showing up in prompts, but how we're showing up, right?
Sure.
So we found that our on-premises solution is mentioned at like a 4-to-1 ratio of our cloud solution. This is not good, right? Because we're in the enterprise business. We really only get one shot at this, right? So if someone's doing some deep research into us and they find, Informatica has outdated, they're an on-premises solution, why would I go with them? That's not true. But if they're getting that information from the LLM because there's 30 years of web pages, not just on our own website, of things talking about this, then that's going to be the perception they have. So a lot of what we're working on right now is not just to show up, in a broad, like as much as possible, but how we're showing up.
And so, so then you're starting with the website as the first place for that narrative driver?
The website is the first thing. So we're going to a lot of our pages that talk about on-premises, especially huge problem in like our documentation, for example. There's 30 years of documentation, right? So we're going in and making changes to this, adding language that makes it clear that we offer IDMC, the cloud solution, not our on-premises Power Center solution. So things like that, and we've already noticed somewhat of a difference. I mean, it's early days, but this is huge, and this is not something that in an Google SEO only world would have really come up, right? Because people would have to type in our on-premises Power Center solution to find it. Whereas, if they just went to our website, well, we're going to talk about IDMC, but it's not just about what's on the website. That's the start, but it's about everything that's out there. You would have never touched documentation pages like that in the past.
Right. And so let's see. So you got your website, you got all the social media reservoirs, probably some PR. Are you guys using?
Absolutely. Yep. We're definitely do some PR. Luckily, like we're, a mid-sized enterprise company. So like the, being able to get like our CEO on CNBC or something like that is possible. It's happened, writing for Fortune or major magazines. And, we can talk about this. We can talk about our journey to the cloud. So the more things that are out there that talks about that in the specific narrative driver way, the better.
Yeah. And you're leveraging those high domain authority sites that are going to be more likely to get crawled.
Absolutely.
That's so. What else in the narrative drivers? What's kind of more of that process for you?
So I would say the biggest thing is going into we've done a lot of actually technical SEO. So doing a huge crawl of some of those documentation pages I'd mentioned. So we have like over 40,000 that mention Power Center. Wow. It's a lot. So yeah. So right now I'm working with the docs team to revise all these. And
holy cow.
It's a job, man. It's a job. So that's been the biggest thing. But even for shorter wins, actually the FAQs, going into, we have a page that's about like Power Center downloads. Right. So going in, so the search intent of that page is someone looking to download this on-premises software. And then we modified the page to, still get that intent, still capture that intent of somebody looking for it, but also adding, a story to it, adding FAQs that clarify like, oh, why can't I download Power Center? What's the alternative to Power Center? And we've noticed, going to Gemini AI mode, it actually updated. If you search things around like, how do I download Power Center? It'll say, oh, Power Center doesn't exist. Like, you can use IDMC instead, which is exactly what we want to see at scale.
Yeah. No, and it looks like you've done a great job telling Google what you guys are doing. And then how do you monitor? I mean, I think that's probably the easiest one to monitor. How do you manage and watch what Chat and some of the other engines are doing?
So we have a tool from SEMrush called the AI SEO Toolkit, and pretty much what this does is monitors your overall brand visibility. Can see your narrative drivers. Can see where you're doing well. It could break it down by product categories, so you could say like, hey, which products are we? Do we have a lot of visibility around? Which ones do we have less? Do we want to improve this? Is this something that we, really even offer? Like, in some instances, we're showing up great for something that's not, not a primary driver of our business. Because, the one thing that's kind of unique about Informatica is the IDMC solution is like an all-in-one data management solution, which is unique to the industry. So it's everything from like master data management to data quality, data integration, et cetera. Whereas most companies only offer one part of the stack. We have an all-in-one solution. So it's like we're kind of competing on like 8 or 9 different fronts, at any one time.
You are like a road maintenance crew.
Exactly.
By the time you finish one project, the first project will be ready to get started.
Yep. So I went from janitor to monitoring the highways. So.
I love it. Well, what do you think? What's kind of next on your list? Because you guys are taking on this project where literally 1% of American companies are even implementing anything around this right now. So super bleeding edge. But what do you see that you're moving on to that's even farther out in terms of new tactics or new techniques?
Yeah, I would say adopting the topical authority paradigm. So that topical authority is not new, right? This is how Google has been judging websites. So, just for those on the know, what topical authority is it's kind of taking a singular topic and writing on a bunch of different angles. This was kind of like a little popularized by HubSpot with like their hub and spoke model. But I think now it's a little different because you're no longer just hitting different variations of the keyword. That's kind of what it used to be traditionally. Like, let's say, you were a travel blogger and you were writing about Glacier National Park. So like you would have, your hub guide, then you would do Glacier National Park hikes, you would write about, then you would have one article on each of the different hikes. And like, that would be topical authority. Now it's beyond that because now we're just not looking at the keyword, but we're looking at the, narrative drivers or sentiment, things that might come up in the sales log, et cetera, things that you wouldn't find in an SEO tool because a lot of these tools are outdated, frankly. Like the way the internet works is totally different. So a lot of what we're optimizing for is something called query fan out, which what that means is basically now anytime that a search is run, an LLM, there are anywhere between like 25 and 100 searches that run in the background.
Sure.
And the answer is just like a kind of Frankenstein of those, 25 to 100 searches, right? So we don't have visibility into what's happening on the back end. So we just have to show up everywhere as much as possible. So
just everywhere.
Exactly. So, you were talking about acronyms with, SEO, GEO, et cetera. The one I've heard that I like the best with, it still uses the SEO acronym, but it's search everywhere optimization.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. I love it. Well, if I type in the ChatGPT, Daniel Horowitz comic books, what am I going to find about you?
I don't know as much for comic books because I've only published one. But if you type in Daniel Horowitz SEO, you might find some stuff.
Oh, that's boring. I know. Tell me about your comic book.
I did write a superhero comic for a small publisher called Cornerstone Creative Studios. That's
nice.
Kind of, it's like a Vietnam era superhero. It's pretty cool. And I do have a graphic novel coming out. I'm working on a novel right now. So, the graphic novel might be out in, I don't know, 4 months, 6 months, hopefully.
Well, that's exciting. And that gives you something to do that is a different part of your brain.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, writing is my first love. I mean, that's how I got into SEO. actually was, I was writing for so many online publications after I was in college, and I'm just like, oh, I think I'm learning SEO. So, just with all the on-page stuff. So I ended up working for the agency I worked at for 7 years, just like as a contractor. And then, it ended up being a great fit.
Yeah, I love it. Well, I love the work that you're doing, and I really appreciate you taking some time to break down what you're doing at Informatica and how you're doing it.
Absolutely.
So thank you for that. If people want to get in touch with you and talk to you, how do they strike up a conversation about SEO or comic books?
Yeah, so I would say I'm primarily active on LinkedIn right now. So you could just look me up at linkedin.com/in/Daniel Horowitz SEO. Very active on there. I post daily. I think of something almost like 13,000 followers now. So and every day I kind of posting some sort of insight about what's happening in search. So, would love to connect with you there.
I love it. We really appreciate it. And I'd love to have you back on the show in a few months and see if what's changed for all the AI stuff.
Oh, a lot will change. So
we know just in the time of this interview, it's changed.
True. Gemini 4 just came out. So.
Right. All right. Well, Daniel, thanks again. I'm very grateful to you for your time, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks for having me, Emanuel. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Daniel. Well, there's some great pearls in there around narrative drivers and understanding about how to set up your company, your brand, your personal brand around being a subject matter expert and really having the story of your company and your services across all the different platforms in a variety of ways and be in that AI search everywhere. I hope this conversation with Daniel was valuable to you and that you got some takeaways to include in your SEO, GEO, AEO projects. I also hope that you take some time to research some other AI tools that will help you get some time back from your work week. And with that time, you continue to upskill, that you spend it with your friends and family, and that you get away from the screens and get outside in nature and discover what you love to do that's creative. And that this AI revolution that we're in creates an opportunity for the second renaissance, and that we all become a little more creative in our lives. This is Emanuel Rose, Marketing in the Age of AI.
Thanks for listening to Marketing in the Age of AI. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss a future episode. Your copy of Authentic Marketing in the Age of AI is available at Amazon.com or EmanuelRose.com. You can also connect with Emanuel on LinkedIn. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.